They told him he was too quiet, too different, too invisible to ever matter. But when the world turned its back on Nathan Carter, he didn't shrink. He rose. Now, as the youngest faculty member at the University of Maine, he's about to prove that genius isn't defined by appearance, and greatness isn't limited by the world's expectations. Stay with us as this remarkable story unfolds. Thank you for watching and engaging with this series. Be sure to check out our other videos for more inspiring stories. Now, let's begin. The middle school in the small town had seen better days. The bricks of the old building were cracked, weathered by time, each crevice a silent witness to the generations of students who had walked its halls. The floors creaked under the weight of footsteps, the paint on the walls peeled in thin curls, and the windows, covered in a fine layer of dust, barely allowed sunlight to seep through. Despite its worn appearance, the school held the dreams of countless children, each hoping that education would be their ticket to a better future, even when the world outside seemed determined to keep them where they were. In room 202 Ms. Delaney stood at the front of the classroom, her arms folded tightly across her chest. Her short, tight curls framed a face that rarely showed warmth, and the glasses perched low on her nose gave her the air of someone who expected discipline and order above all else. Ms. Delaney prided herself on being strict, believing that authority and control were the keys to molding successful students. But there was a flaw in her philosophy. She often judged students not by their potential, but by what they appeared to be. And that was where Nathan Carter, sitting quietly at the back of the room, slipped through the cracks. At 13, Nathan was a black boy with worn-out clothes that looked a size too big. His hair was unkempt, his eyes often downcast. He carried the weight of his socioeconomic background like a shadow. But there was something more, something no one seemed to notice. A quiet brilliance burned within him, a mind that saw patterns where others saw chaos, that found comfort in numbers when words failed him. Nathan didn't fit the mold. He wasn't loud or outgoing, and he rarely raised his hand in class. Instead, he sat in the back, scribbling numbers in the margins of his notebook, absorbed in a world of calculations and equations. Raised by his father, Mr. Carter, a former accountant who had lost his job when the local brewery shut down, Nathan had learned to value perseverance and intellect over appearances. But the world around him refused to see beyond the surface. Ms. Delaney was no exception. She rarely called on him, instead favoring the students who spoke the loudest, who fit her image of what intelligence looked like. To her, Nathan was just another quiet, unmotivated student. Someone who didn't try. Someone who didn't matter. That day, the class was tackling quadratic equations, something Nathan had mastered long before his peers. Numbers were his refuge, a language he understood more deeply than anyone in that room. But no one knew. No one cared. And so, when Ms. Delaney's sharp voice cut through the classroom, he felt his stomach tighten. "Nathan," she called, glancing over her glasses. "Come up and solve this equation." She scrawled a complicated expression on the board, her tone filled with an air of skepticism. "Let's see if you can handle this." A ripple of laughter swept through the class. Nathan hesitated, feeling the weight of every pair of eyes turning toward him. He knew the answer. He knew exactly how to solve the equation. But the heat of the moment froze him. Slowly, he stood, suppressing the panic that threatened to choke him. His hand shook slightly as he walked to the board. He could already hear the giggles, the whispers, the mocking glances exchanged between his classmates. And then, just as he reached for the chalk, Ms. Delaney spoke again. "Take your time, Nathan," she said, her voice laced with condescension. The snickers grew louder. Nathan stared at the equation. It was wrong. Ms. Delaney had made an error in her setup. The coefficients didn't align. The solution she expected didn't exist. He hesitated. If he pointed it out, he would be challenging her in front of the class. She might humiliate him even further. But if he didn't, he would be failing himself. A voice echoed in his memory, his father's voice. "Never let anyone make you doubt what you know, Nathan." Taking a deep breath, he finished solving the equation. But then, in clear, Steady handwriting, he corrected it. Turning to the class, he said, "Actually, MS. Delaney, there's an error in the problem." Silence fell over the room. He explained, carefully and methodically, why the equation had been wrong and how it should have been set up. The class stopped whispering. MS. Delaney's face twisted in disbelief as she stepped forward, scanning the board. And then she saw it. He was right. But instead of admitting her mistake, she straightened, her voice tight. "Nathan, you're disrupting my class. Sit down." A heavy stillness filled the room. Nathan returned to his seat, his chest heavy with humiliation. But something inside him had shifted. He had spoken out. He had proven himself, even if no one else realized it yet. He was more than they thought. And that was just the beginning. The weight of MS. Delaney's dismissal followed Nathan home that day. As he sat at the dinner table, picking at his food, his father noticed the look on his face. "What's wrong, mister?" Carter asked, his voice full of concern. Nathan hesitated, then spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "MS. Delaney, she doesn't think I know anything. She humiliated me today. I corrected her, and she got mad." He swallowed hard. "I think she hates me." "Mister." Carter was silent for a long moment. Then he placed a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "Son, I know it's hard," he said, "but you have something that no one can take away. Your mind, your talent. Keep working hard, and let that be what speaks for you." But MS. Delaney's treatment continued. She ignored Nathan completely, never called on him, made sure he was assigned the least important tasks in group work. The other students noticed, and the ridicule only grew. Nathan felt himself retreating into silence. It was safer that way, until one day, he decided enough was enough. He walked into the principal's office and told him everything. Principal Hayes listened, nodding gravely. "No student should feel invisible, Nathan. Thank you for coming forward." A week later, MS. Delaney was removed from her position. The school, realizing the need for change, hired a new teacher, Mr. Blake, a young black educator who believed in seeing every student's potential. From the moment he stepped into the classroom, things were different. And when he saw Nathan sitting quietly in the back, he knew immediately this boy had something special. "Let's see what you can do, Nathan, mister," Blake said one day, pointing to a complex equation. Nathan walked to the board, picked up the chalk, and solved it effortlessly. And for the first time, the class didn't laugh. They watched in awe. And in that moment, Nathan Carter was no longer invisible. He was undeniable.